بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful, and peace be upon the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May Allah's peace and blessings be upon him and upon his family and upon his companions. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome. Thank you everyone for taking the time to join us this Sunday evening with our esteemed guest, Brother Robert Dafour. Assalamu alaikum, Robert. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Sorry, I had the YouTube channel up and I heard your voice twice. So, but I'm doing good. Alhamdulillah. Go ahead.
If that's fine, Robert, can you just mute the YouTube channel? I think it's coming through on this.
I turned it off, so I can hear you and you can hear me. So
just bear with me for just a moment.
Yeah. Uh-oh. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yeah. Sorry, there seemed to be a little bit of echo. That should be sorted now.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, so we will also have Sister Aliyah joining us later today, inshallah. That will be in the latter half. So today's discussion, inshallah, it will be a thought-provoking exploration of how individuals who revert to Islam in Western societies can flourish, and how we as fellow students, as friends, as community leaders, can facilitate the integration and support of newcomers to the Islamic faith, as well as also secure that support and integrity in the long term. Part of the dialogue will also explore Robert's perspective on a sustainable social solution for reverts/converts, and why, in Robert's view, the Medina model cannot be seamlessly replicated in the West. Robert and Aliyah will also share their key experiences and journeys as converts. There will be a Q&A panel, so please do type up your questions and send them into the chat. That will be either in the YouTube chat box or in the Twitter/X chat box, whichever platform you're watching from. They will be picked up by my colleague Omer, and please also specify which of our two guests the question is aimed towards. As I mentioned, Sister Ali will be joining us later, but just a quick introduction for Brother Robert before I hand over to him. So Robert is a Canadian convert to Islam of 20 years. He received his bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Toronto and his master's degree from the University of Windsor in 2015. He is the current frontman for Islam for Europeans, which is an organization dedicated to healing the broken relationship between Muslims and Westerners. You can reach out to Brother Robert by email at islamforeurope@gmail.com or at his YouTube channel, Islam for Europeans, which has some really interesting topics for discussion. I really do recommend checking that out. Brother Robert, if you may, with tawfiq.
All right. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulullah wa ahbadihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Thank you so much for having me on, Abdullah. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you, and inshallah we'll have a good about 25-30 minutes to discuss an alternative model in a way that we can improve not just the status of converts, but also just Muslims in general living in the West. So we're taking a more holistic approach to it. So I don't know if you could see my PowerPoint presentation here. How can I add that? Can you see that, Abdullah? I just see a blank screen. Can you hear me? Oh, I'm all all right.
Yeah, sorry, it doesn't seem to be showing up just yet.
Yeah, it should be showing up soon, inshallah.
Okay.
In any case, I'll get right to it. I was just going to give a brief story about how I kind of came to these conclusions, because when I was first became Muslim, the mosque tried a bunch of different convert programs to try to help out converts, and they were kind of falling flat, and I didn't really understand why. My family had no problem with my conversion to Islam. So that's kind of the norm, and I'll kind of get into why that is. But I remember participating in an open house, where people would come to the mosque, and the volunteers, which I was a part of, we would be paired up together. So I was paired up with a Pakistani sister, and there was one older white gentleman who came in later on, and our job was to we had all these panels set up about what Islam was about and explaining those things. So the gentleman, he asked about marriage, like how do Muslims get married, right? Like what's the process? And the sister, she was very articulate. She said, well, the families will get involved. Usually the father will look into a Muslim family that has a potential suitor for their son or their daughter. They'll check the whole life history. They'll make sure that that these spouses are going to be compatible before they even meet. And in many cases, the families will set up the marriages themselves. So there's this whole process that takes place, and we don't really date in Islam. So the gentleman said, "Oh, that's great. Try to share again. Okay, that's great." And and then he looked at me and he said, "Well, what do you guys do?" Because he himself, he knew that I was a convert to Islam, right? And I just didn't have an answer for him. And I just thought to my, and that just kind of sparked the whole idea of, maybe we're doing this all wrong. Maybe we need to rethink how we deal with converts in the West. It's going to have such a huge, uh, factor in terms of like how we integrate them, because we're seeing a very large rate of people leaving the Muslim community or sometimes Islam altogether. So I think the issues are very multi-layered and very deep. So I'm going to get into those, inshallah. I'm just going to see if I can share my screen now. That's live, window, entire screen. Okay, I'll go with entire screen and you'll be able to see that. Okay, also share system audio. So share. Can I do that? I don't think you can. Uh, Live studio. Let me see if that'll work. Uh, I don't know. We'll see if we're able to see it here. Okay, a small town in southwestern Ontario in 1981. I was raised Catholic. I converted to Islam in 2003. I was an integrated member of the Muslim community in Windsor. Um, and I actually went through a divorce where the families were completely opposed to the daughter's conversion, so that was a big eye opener. Like as Abdullah said, I completed my master's degree in social psychology from the University of Windsor, and that really opened my eyes in terms of like how groups and societies work, how they function, and what are the different psychological things that happen at the group level that kind of influences how converts work together, and how Muslim societies function. So a few caveats before we begin. Like I said, Abdullah said that I'm the front man for a group called Islam for Europeans. We're not a racist or a separatist group. We're interested in improving the relationship between Muslims and the West, but also proposing ideas that help out not just converts but the Muslim community in general. Another caveat is that I know that this is a new idea, and the knee-jerk reaction from some Muslims is going to be to reject this new model. But even I myself was against this idea until recently, right? So I just want to keep that in mind. Thirdly, we need to get more research data on this subject, because I think there's a real lack of research data when it comes to Westerners' opinions about Islam, Muslims, different societal and political issues, but also like the Muslim community themselves, and how that the interactions or the lack thereof with non-Muslim communities. And again, what I said, what we're proposing is going to be good for the whole Muslim Ummah. So we're not. This is not a zero-sum game. If you have a healthy sub-community of converts to Islam, no matter what non-Muslim country you're in, that'll improve the relationship and the image of Islam in the West as a whole. And finally, like if I was a convert myself in Japan, like I would be recommending the same thing to Japanese converts, right? So, I'm not trying to, we don't propose this model, to feel superior in any way. This is just the situation that we're in. Um, so what are some of the issues that are facing converts, people who do convert to Islam in the West? And I think that's an important thing to talk about. First and foremost, and this is a huge thing, is ostracization and alienation from family members. That is a major issue, and it's also not just the main difficulty faced by people who have converted to Islam, but also why a lot of people don't convert to Islam in the first place. And finally, why after they do convert to Islam, it's difficult for them to stay. So that's definitely a huge factor. There's just especially in the West, there's a perception that the convert to Islam is a traitor to one's culture. There's also extreme loneliness and alienation. In addition, there's a steep learning curve. So a lot of mosque programs that are catered more towards born Muslims. They're very advanced, and I think that you're taking, in the most cases, you're taking someone who's at a preschool level and trying to teach them graduate level classes. Also, there's not fitting in with the Muslim community. And that's not to say that the Muslim community doesn't give us a big warm welcome and is happy to have us as Muslims, but I could just say that our experiences oftentimes could be very different, and it's difficult to fit in sometimes. And like I said, unfortunately and sadly, there's a high apostasy rate among converts. In some cases, and some amounts have pointed this out in the United States, as high as 70%. Um, so, basically, our thesis is that converts to Islam should collectivize into sub-communities, just as other Muslim sub-communities have already done so in the West. So what do I mean by a sub-community? And again, the knee-jerk reaction is to reject this idea. But what I mean by that is that you have a wolf pack. You have a group of people who are coming from the same experiences, who are looking out for one another, who are organizing, creating their own organizations, their own fora, their own restaurants, their own Islamic classes, things of that nature. But at the same time, you're not separating yourselves from the greater Muslim community. You're still interacting with other Muslims. You're still saying salam to them on the street. You're still, fulfilling all the five responsibilities that you have toward your fellow Muslims. But at the same time, again, it's the fact that converts need to organize themselves because they have issues, that they can focus on themselves. Um, yeah, and one of the main reasons for that is that when we look at the way you're dealing with converts now, is that it's kind of like an assimilation process where the person converts to Islam and they enter into the Muslim community and exit the cultural sphere of their Muslim community. And that sounds like a good idea on the surface, but what that does is create a vacuum. It creates a vacuum, basically. So the fewer Muslims you have in a cultural sphere, the more difficult it is to study Islam, B, think about converting to Islam, C, converting to Islam in the first place, and D, remaining as a Muslim. Um, so getting into recommendations. So, let's give a bigger picture of what this organization might look like. So it would be convert run, convert led, and here in my city, we're focusing on three main things: Islam 101 classes, so the very basics of Islam; Quran 101 classes, so Alif Ba, it's the very basics about learning, Arabic and Quran, and social events, right? So meeting up with other converts, getting to know one another, networking, and so those are the three main things. And the social events, are catered towards the converts themselves, right? And other resources include you can marriage networking among the converts themselves, and if need be, interventions with other family members. That's if it's approved by the convert and all other parties. And I think part of that is because if you look at the way that Islamic courses or the way mosques try to help out converts, if they do try to help them out, all of the things that they create, they don't address this issue, and it's one of the biggest issues why people don't convert to Islam in the first place, is because they have to deal with their non-Muslim family and community. At most, they'll say, bring your family and community to the mosque. Well, in some cases that works, but for the most part, I can tell you that many non-Muslims, even if they have a positive image of Islam, getting them to come to a mosque is very, very difficult, and that may take weeks or months or years, and maybe not even ever. And then finally, networking, with masajid in nearby cities. Okay, um, so let's give a brief overview of comparing pre-modern to postmodern eras, and just to see how the model in Medina can't really be applied to non-Muslim countries in the West. So as you know, Islam came to 7th century Arabia to call the worship the one God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and follow the manners and teachings of Muhammad, peace be upon him. As we know, Islam in the pre-modern era, once Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam died, it spread to different lands and different cultures, right? So, and when Islam expanded out, what happened is that the local people who converted to Islam, first of all, they didn't convert to Islam en masse right away, 100%. But what they did do is that they incorporated their urf, or like their traditional culture, into Islam. So they didn't have to take on the many aspects of the Arab culture. They incorporated their dress, cuisine, architecture, and this is just a more natural process because we have to understand that you know in the pre-modern era, a lot of traveling was done on foot, or by camel, like radius from birth to death, and the talk the place, and that's stuff to think about and talk about. But the fact of the matter is that people stayed within the same general region and allowed Islam to cultivate over the centuries until it became part of their culture, right? Right. So uh, um, yeah. So examples, from this.
Apologies, we seem to have lost Brother Robert. We're just trying to fix this. Just please bear with us. Assalamu alaikum. Apologies, we seem to have lost Brother Robert. He will be back inshallah for the Q&A panel. But yeah, there's some really interesting points in there, and hopefully we can hear a little bit more from him later on. I'll now introduce Sister Aliyah Raiyan, as I can see that she has just joined us. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Aliyah. How are you doing?
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah. And how are you, brother?
Alhamdulillah, bi khair. Thank you.
Good.
Just a quick introduction for Sister Aliyah Umm Raiyan, for those of you who are not familiar with her. So Aliyah Umm Raiyan converted to Islam 24 years ago and has been involved in UK Da'wah for over 20 years. In 2010, she founded Solace UK, a charity that helps women who have converted to Islam and find themselves in difficulty. In 2019, she launched a YouTube show called Honest Tea Talk, which brought unscripted conversations to the table about raw, unspoken topics related to the Muslim community. She continues to devote her time to help women achieve their full potential, whilst emphasizing the importance of developing a personal and close relationship with Allah. In 2022, she was approached by the publisher Penguin to write and publish a book. The book, Ramadan Reflections, was published on 2nd March 2023 and has become a Sunday Times bestseller. She lives in East London, where she home educates her children. Look out for her next book, also published by Penguin, which is out in February 2024, inshallah. Sister Aliyah, the floor is yours, inshallah.
Jazakumullah khair. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Right, I thrive on interaction. So I would like everyone to, I don't know, I can't even see where the chat is, the main chat, but I'd like everyone just to give me a wave or a salam, just so I can see that you're here and listening in. Brother Abdullah, you might have to help me out. I hope I can see a private chat. I'm not sure about the public chat.
On the right-hand side, if you look.
Okay, yes. So for those who are present, if you can just give me a salam or a wave, just so that I know that you're here, inshallah. Because I will be asking you some questions. Excellent. Alhamdulillah. So I can see we have, mashallah, a few brothers. Do we have any sisters present today? Wa alaikum salam rahmatullah. MashaAllah. Okay, so I'm going to need to ask a few questions before I begin, because I need to know who I am speaking with tonight. So if you are a new Muslim, so you have whichever term you would prefer to use, converted or reverted to Islam, please can you just give me a thumbs up in the chat box, please? So if you have reverted or converted to Islam, relatively new Muslim, just give me a thumbs up, or just say, yeah, me, in the chat box. Okay, it doesn't appear, doesn't look like we have anyone who has actually embraced Islam. Is that correct, Brother Abdullah?
I think so, yeah. You might be right in that.
Okay.
Actually, we do have one.
Oh, okay, we have one, Brother Paul, mashallah. Okay, so we have one, alhamdulillah. Is there anyone here who isn't actually Muslim? If you could just share a thumbs up, or just to say me, if you are here, but you are not of the Islamic faith. Okay, I'll just give it a few more seconds, inshallah. And finally, how many of you are actually part of your university ISOC? So if you can just say me, just type me, share it in the chat box. How many of you are active or an active member of your ISOC? Okay. Okay, so we have another revert, mashallah. And we have two brothers here, I believe. Okay, alhamdulillah. So I want you to stay engaged with me because, like I said, whenever I speak, I don't like to give a lecture because I believe that we are all students of one another. We can learn from one another. And when we come together and we discuss and we share our opinions respectfully, there's so much that we can learn. So, whether you have attended maybe a speech that I've given at your, to your ISOC event, or you've seen me online, I do prefer to have a conversation rather than me lecture and you listen. So this is going to be quite interactive. So jazakumullah khair to all of you for your willingness to participate, inshallah. So where are we at? 26th of November 2023. Subhanallah, the last month, well, almost 2 months, subhanallah. The world has changed. There has been a shift in the entire world. And I wrote about this actually on, I shared this on social media, that subhanAllah, despite the horrific atrocities that are taking place in Gaza and the ways in which members of the Ummah are suffering, despite this, there has been so much khair, so much good that has come out of this. Muslims are coming back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are returning to their faith. They are questioning the purpose in their life, despite the fact that they already believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are, kind of really sitting with themselves and analyzing where they are and where they know they're going to go, what Islam has stipulated, which is that every single soul will taste death and there will be a day of judgment and we will meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we will be held accountable for our deeds. And so they're sitting with that and they're looking back and they're thinking, okay, I believe in La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, but are my actions a proof for that belief? Are they a support of that belief? Or are my actions completely almost betraying that which I believe? And so there's been a shift amongst Muslims, subhanallah, and it's a beautiful shift, and it's been truly humbling to observe. And then you have a major shift amongst non-Muslims. And that is, here we have mainstream media driving this narrative that Muslims are terrorists, that Muslims are extreme, that Muslims are backwards, that Muslims are barbaric, that Muslims are the bad guys. And what's coming out of Gaza is actually showing a completely different light, one that we know as members of the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We know that we belong to a faith that is compassionate, that is merciful, that promotes kindness and gentleness, and even during war, a faith that stipulates that you cannot cross certain boundaries. And we are seeing this come out of Gaza. And what's been really interesting for me as someone that became Muslim 24 years ago is to see the large numbers, mashallah, tabarakallah, the large numbers of non-Muslims order the Quran, pick up the Quran, they're reading the Quran, they're reading the tafsir of the Quran, they are reading verses and they're looking back at historical facts to support what they're reading. And they're really reflecting, they're almost doing their own tadabbur, their own reflection of the Quran. And we are finding that so many people are actually embracing Islam, and this is a wonderful and beautiful thing. Now, for me, as someone who has been Muslim for a very, very long time, alhamdulillah, all praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and as someone who set up a charity called Solace, where we support women who have embraced Islam and find themselves in difficulty, there's a part of me that feels very happy and that celebrates this shift amongst new Muslims, this beautiful curiosity that they are experiencing in terms of our deen. But then there's a side of me that feels a sense of anxiety, because I see so many men and women become Muslim, they're converting to Islam or reverting to Islam, whichever term you'd prefer to use. But what concerns me is, after the celebrations have kind of calmed down and died down, are they going to receive the correct support that they need? And this is very, very crucial, because you see what I find, and subhanAllah, I became Muslim in 1999. And here we are in 2023, and things actually haven't changed, in that the Ummah is very quick, and rightly so, and naturally so, very, very quick to um, celebrate someone entering the fold of Islam, and I'm part of that, and I'm sure everyone would want to be a part of that celebration, and may even promise or offer the newly converted support, or if you need anything, we're here. And they may even signpost that person to certain organizations or books or scholars or lectures. But then when the excitement begins to fade, what concerns me is, where is that individual going to find themselves? Or even for them as individuals, when the passion and the zeal that comes with embracing Islam, and the fact that it's all new and it's fresh and there's so much to learn and so much to absorb, when that begins to calm down and you actually face the reality of life, that you have actually transitioned from one lifestyle to another, and that transition takes many, many years, sometimes it can feel like a bit of a shock. Or when the Muslim community has done their celebration, and they kind of forget about that person that has become Muslim. It's this that makes me feel worried. Now, when I became Muslim, just to share a little bit of my story. If you're on YouTube, and you want to listen to my story in more detail, I told my story in depth in an interview on the channel called Towards Eternity. So if you scroll and look for my name, I tell my story in depth there. But essentially, I was given dawah, just to kind of give you a very short summary of my journey to Islam. I was given dawah by a friend of mine at school, and uh, it didn't start off as dawah. It started off with me feeling an inclination towards her. I admired her sense of peace. I admired her ability to go through life's tests with a smile on her face, with this contentment with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's decree. And so we became very, very close friends. I was going through some stuff. She was going through some stuff with her family. And then I actually began to look into Islam to actually try to save her, because I was one of those who had been brainwashed by mainstream media into believing that Muslim women were so oppressed, and Islam would only contribute towards their downfall as individuals. And so I began to look into Islam to try to save her from this life. this destructive lifestyle that I thought it was. And I began to read leaflets, listen to cassettes. That shows you how old I am. And then slowly I began to become convinced. And we would debate, and um, we would speak regularly about the existence of God, whether the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was indeed the messenger, what was the tangible, rational proof. So these were the types of kind of arguments and discussions that we would have. And over time, I became more and more convinced until it became quite overwhelming, and I stopped looking into Islam. I cut that particular friend out of my life. I put all the cassettes and leaflets away, um, because I knew that I was changing. I was changing from a rational perspective, and also my heart was changing too. And it scared me, it terrified me, because I'm the type of person that always gives 150% to what I do. So I knew that, oh, this is actually, I haven't found a contradiction to save my friend. I'm becoming convinced, my mind and my heart are changing. What am I going to do? Because I know that if I continue to embark upon this journey of discovery, I'm going to have to change my life. And that absolutely terrified me. And I think that actually is something that many of us who have embraced Islam have experienced prior to embracing Islam. That there is this fear of, do I know enough? Am I going to be able to change? What does that even entail? Is it going to be too difficult? Or maybe you don't want to give up certain things, or maybe you do want to give up certain things, but you feel like you need to be perfect first before you become Muslim. And it's a very delicate, very complex time. Anyway, so I pushed Islam quite literally out of sight and out of mind. But subhanAllah, it still very much, resides in my heart. And so I won't, go into too many details. You can watch the video about that. But eventually, alhamdulillah, I became Muslim. And then after that, obviously I was young when I became Muslim, but after that I encountered a number of difficulties and challenges. And I can see now, and again, I'm not going to go into details about that. You can watch the video, but I can see now that that was actually uh, the beautiful decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because had I not gone through these difficulties and challenges, I wouldn't have set up the charity Solace, which deals with all of the things that the Muslim community don't really speak about. When you think of a convert to Islam or a revert to Islam, you think, yeah, this is amazing, this is wonderful, they're better than me, their faith is so strong, and they're able to almost conquer the world. But you don't see the struggles. We don't talk about the struggles. We don't talk about the difficulties, the severe difficulties that sometimes a revert can encounter. So alhamdulillah, I'm grateful for what I went through, because I can see that it was the perfect decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in leading me to set up a charity that solely dealt with the difficulties a woman convert or revert faces after they become Muslim. So that's a little bit about my journey. Now, for those who have embraced Islam, I have a question for you. What challenges have you faced as a revert or convert? If you can just share that in the chat box, please. What challenges have you faced as a revert or convert?
Sister Aliyah, I just realized there is a slight delay between the live and the YouTube, about 10 seconds. So if you want to maybe move on a little bit, and then we can come back to the chat box if that's suitable for yourself.
Okay.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if the audience heard you, Brother Abdullah, but it seems that there's a delay. But I would like to hear from the reverts in the room what challenges. Okay, so I've got a few coming in now. What challenges they have encountered as new Muslims. So, Brother Simon, you said sustaining learning. Okay. Anyone else that can share? I'll just wait for a few more people, inshallah. So any challenges or difficulties that you, or even if it's not yourself, perhaps challenges and difficulties a fellow revert or convert faced, maybe in the early months or years of them becoming Muslim. And just to add, actually, and this is a very important point, that sometimes the difficulties and challenges in being a revert can often manifest many, many years down the line. So technically, according to the community, you're no longer a new Muslim because you've been Muslim maybe 10 years. But some of the difficulties that went unaddressed, shortly after becoming Muslim, often manifests many, many years down the line. This is something that we've encountered a lot, in the course of the support that we've provided at Solace. So let me share some of the challenges that I faced. There was, as I said, there was so much excitement. I became Muslim at a time where reverts were rare. MashaAllah, now, 2023, you hear regularly, you hear about men and women becoming Muslim, but I became Muslim at a time where it was quite rare. And so there was so much excitement when I became Muslim, and so much celebration. And I had promises that, I would be invited over for iftar. And, if I ever needed anything, then just to pick up the phone and call. And unfortunately, after a while, it became quite quiet. People disappeared. Those that said that they would offer support just disappeared. And so it felt as though, I was carried by the community and celebrated and then dropped. And this is something that many, many reverts have also experienced. I would say that the second thing that I personally struggled with was loneliness, particularly for me, because my family were very unsupportive of my choice to embrace Islam. And so I lost friends, I lost family. Um, and you can imagine the promises that were given at the time when I became Muslim that went unfulfilled also created a sense of isolation and loneliness. So that's another one. As I mentioned, family. So in my case, my family were unsupportive. There was a time where there was a real, actual hatred for Islam, and I had to leave the family home. I was alone, so actual practical difficulties, having to find a job at a very young age, provide a roof over my head, food in my mouth. Also, confusion. So when I became Muslim through a particular Islamic group, which I am no longer a part of. But my entrance into Islam was through them, and this was the only Islam that I knew. So I didn't know that there were different paths, different scholars, different schools of thought, and it was overwhelming and incredibly confusing. When all I was really trying to do was to, now that I believed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I believed that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was his final messenger, I just wanted to live as a Muslim. And then suddenly I was bombarded with all of this information, and, this person pulling me here and that person pulling me there. And it was so overwhelming that it kind of hindered my progress in terms of learning. So that was another one. And then the major one, and I believe that this is something that, as I said, can manifest many, many years down the line, is identity. I find that the community, with their good intention, mashallah, almost have this expectation that you've become Muslim now, so you are different. You must, change your name, which actually is not, it's not obligatory for you to change your name. That you must let go of everything that you were, and you must now become this ideal Muslim and this ideal Muslimah. When we know that the Quran was revealed gradually over many years. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows the human condition. He knows the human mind and He knows the human heart. And He subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that the human being can only truly absorb and accept new information in small doses. And this is ever so true for those who embrace Islam. But there is this expectation for us to almost, remove our old skin, and just become this new person. And that often causes a major identity crisis, which can lead to psychological problems, where you find yourself maybe many years after becoming Muslim, and you ask yourself, hold on a second, who am I? who am I? Who is this? You look in the mirror, who is this? Maybe you look at yourself in hijab, or you look at yourself maybe with a beard, or I don't know, and you think, who am I? And it's not because anything is wrong with the deen. It's because we don't pay enough attention as a community in providing the necessary emotional, psychological, mental support to new Muslims in establishing an identity that is healthy, that is achieved gradually and slowly, and that actually we're not new people. We are who we were. Islam has entered our lives by the permission and mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring about our qualities, to bring them to the surface and to make us even better, so there's nothing wrong with liking what we used to like, and doing some of the things that we used to do, so long as they don't contradict Islam. So the identity crisis is a huge one. I can see in the chat box here, someone said learning which madhab or scholars to follow. So it's similar to what I just mentioned. A sister said, I feel like there's this extra expectation on us to be on another level compared to the average Muslim. Right? I touched upon that too. We're held to a high standard by Muslims, and it can be tough trying to live up to that. Also, not knowing which school of thought, scholar or imam to follow. So basically, the brothers and sisters in the chat box have pretty much supported what I've said, and this is across the board. So, what advice can I give to those of you who are listening in, who have embraced Islam, and those of you who are in the dawah and maybe perhaps a part of your ISOC? Well, first of all, I don't like to give advice. I prefer to sit with someone and explore options. And there's a reason for this, and let me explain. I find that, and with good intention, I'm sure, with good intention, and possibly, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Muslims like to give their two pennies worth and like to advise without taking into consideration the full context of the individual. And that's why I think exploring options is much better than giving advice, because when you give advice to someone, you're giving advice based on your own model of the world, based on your own life experiences, which may be completely alien to the person that you're trying to give advice to. However, when you explore options, you're exploring everything that is a possibility in addressing a challenge or a difficulty, and you're leaving it up to the individual based on where they're at and when they're ready and what they're ready to do. You're giving the individual autonomy to choose of those options, and to follow through at a pace that is best for them. I have seen over the years, and it really, really saddens me that many reverts, converts, were given advice which actually made them feel uh, incredibly under pressure, like the sister said in the chat box, feeling like they need to live, on this this righteous level, this pious level, and that they're not allowed to be human. And if anyone has heard or read anything that I've written, um, we are Muslim, we are believers, we have embraced Islam by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we are also human. And I think sometimes that human element, for some reason, is removed when it comes to the expectations that we have of converts. So, in terms of addressing challenges, let's embrace the the beauty that comes out of exploring options, rather than giving individual advice which may, as I said, which may not be applicable to that individual, or they may not be ready to hear or receive. But what I would say in general, and some of these options are, I think for reverts, you have to remember why you became Muslim. You have to constantly go back to the reason why you embraced Islam. And often that was a very private, very personal, very individual choice that you made between you and your Rabb, you and your Lord. And so everything springs from that. And sometimes I think we can lose focus, especially because we're becoming part of a community. We can lose sight of the fact that actually this, when I said La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, it was for Allah. It wasn't for the people. Okay, the people are there to support me, and I'm there to support them, but that decision was a very personal, private decision between me and my Lord. And so I think reminding yourself of that grounds you, and it also gives you permission to embark upon this journey as your individual self, with your strengths, with your weaknesses, with granting yourself compassion at the things that you find difficult. I remember a sister who was struggling to learn how to pray, and she kept berating herself. She said, I know other reverts who, it took them a couple of weeks, and it's taking me 6 months to learn how to pray, and I'm such a bad Muslim. This level of thinking is not something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a Lord that rewards you for your effort in struggling to recite the Quran, yeah, struggling to recite the Quran, then imagine the reward and the mercy that He affords you when you are struggling to do any type of worship. So I think it's, like I said, it's important to kind of go back to the decision that you made as an individual. So as reverts, I would say find your tribe. Find your tribe. Find a group of brothers or sisters who you can be your complete self with, who you can grow with, you can be completely honest with, vulnerable with, and say, I'm finding this hard, or I'm feeling lonely today, or it's Christmas is coming up, and I'm struggling with the family. Find your tribe, and don't be afraid to ask them for support and for help. Don't be afraid to let them know if you're struggling. I would say a regular halaqah, so a regular Islamic class. Try to or aim to attend that like it's obligatory. And the reason being is that, when you become Muslim, Shaitan has everything to steal from you. Now that you have embraced Islam, he's going to do his hardest to take this away from you and remove you from this place of belief. So it's so important that you are around Muslims, that you are seeking knowledge, and that you really attach yourself to a good halaqah where you are learning and you are progressing and you are developing. Loneliness, again, you need to reach out for help. But also, I would say, just because you're Muslim doesn't mean that you need to isolate yourself away from your family. Bring your family into the journey, that you're on. I'm not saying that, invite them to Islam. If you can do that, even better. But, include them. Say, yeah, I'm going to this Islamic circle, and this is what we're talking about. This is what we're discussing. And, Ramadan is coming up, so I'm preparing. Involve them in your life. And I think those that have done this have felt less lonely. Those who have kind of shut themselves away from their family have really, really struggled with this level of isolation. If you're confused, reach out, and just remember that you are you, and now you're Muslim you. And I hope that makes sense. I've said it in very, very simple terms, but that you are still you, and you're just simply now a Muslim you. And I think that's very, very important to so hold on to who you are. You are still Diana or Siren. I'm just looking at the names in the chat box. You're still you. But now you have a belief, you have a journey that you are preparing for to the next life. You have a set of beliefs which transform and change your actions, but you're still you, with your likes, with your dislikes, with the things that make you laugh, with the things that you find funny, with your preferences in fashion. And so it's very, very important. I think those that still maintain a sense of their individual self from before Islam go on to thrive as the Muslim versions of themselves. I hope I'm being clear. Now, just very, very quick, because I know I've gone over my time. An address to the brothers and sisters that are part of the Dawah and members of the ISOC. Now more than ever, due to what I mentioned right at the beginning of this very quick reminder, we all have to be ambassadors of Islam. People are reading the Quran. People are observing Muslims with more intensity than ever before. And so it's not what you say. And I say this all the time, it's not what you say. It's not knowing how to have a theological debate. Okay. If you speak to someone of that level, then that's fine. But really and truly, how many Muslims, how many reverts have come to Islam through the character of another Muslim, through the kindness, through the generosity, through the just quietly observing their akhlaq. This is something that's very, very weighty, and we tend to forget how weighty it is in the dawah. Your actions, your character, what you do is actually stronger than what you say. And many Muslims become, many reverts embrace Islam because of that. So in terms of the ISOC, what can you do to support reverts, converts? Through your action, through your generosity, through your time, through just listening. um and this is really, really important. And obviously, as an ISOC, build up your database of organizations, perhaps in your locality, that offer support. Do obviously check out what Solace does. We only provide support for women at this time. But develop relationships, develop partnerships with organizations and charities like Solace, so that should you be unable, for whatever reason, to support a revert or convert in difficulty, you can signpost them quickly to an organization and charity where they can get the support that they need, the specialized support that they need. And I think, everything that I said in terms of ensuring that a revert and convert um, journeys through their Islam as their individual selves, that at a pace that is healthy for them. It's very, very important that brothers and sisters in the ISOC support that and don't put pressure on brothers and sisters to suddenly transform overnight. Often, when someone becomes Muslim, they want to feel like they belong. They want to feel like they belong, and adding that level of pressure is just, it can send them the other way. And I've seen, actually, unfortunately and very sadly, cases where it has gone the other way and it's pushed people the other way. So yeah, I think there's so much more that I could say. But check out the website www.solaceuk.org to see what we do. And yeah, I think I'm going to end here, inshallah. So I said it was going to be interactive, but it looks like I actually did end up giving more of a lecture. But I think that's because Brother Abdullah did inform me that there was a 10-second delay. So forgive me for that. But to my brothers and sisters who are, who are on this journey, who became Muslim, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for you. May He bless your journey. May He provide you with all the resources and human resources that you need to come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to feel grounded within your faith. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless the brothers and sisters that are part of their ISOCs, so that you can draw more people to Islam, but more importantly than draw more people to Islam, keep them within Islam. That's the key. So Jazakumullah khair for inviting me, Brother Abdullah. It was a pleasure to speak to the brothers and sisters tonight.
I mean, barakallah feek, jazakallah khair for your part, and yeah, you really managed to put in a lot in that short amount of time. So really, we extend our gratitude to you, jazakallah khair. You're welcome to stay for the Q&A panel, but I'm aware you're short of time, so if you want to take your leave, you're free to do that.
That's fine. I might stay for a little bit, and I might have to leave thereafter.
Okay, inshallah. I just want to give also, I see that Brother Robert is back now, so I want to give him an opportunity to complete his segment. Brother Robert, I'll bring you on now.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So sorry about that technical difficulties, but I'm so glad. Can you hear me?
Walaikum salam. Yes. Please do try to share your screen again if you want to as well. I think the full screen.
I don't want to risk it. Okay, so I'll try one more time. If not, I got my iPhone here. Okay, let's try one more time.
Maybe don't make it full screen. I think that's what the problem is.
Okay, so window, there it is. Just gonna click this once. Hopefully I don't freeze again. Can you see it? Can you see it? Uh-oh.
Yes,
Can you see it now?
Yeah, that's fine.
I can't hear. Okay, good. Oh, perfect. Okay, good. Okay, yeah. So, where was I? So, I guess I have to start back over. So, my name is Robert. I converted to Islam in 2003 from Southwestern Ontario, and we're producing. I'm the front man for an organization called Islam for Europeans. So, I want to give a couple of caveats before I begin. One is that so Islam for Europeans, we're not a racist or a separatist group. We're an organization of Muslims of European descent, but we have other, Muslims from all walks of life who are part of our brain trust and who support us in our endeavors. So what we're proposing is a new model that you may have disagreed upon. I may have disagreed with myself when I converted to Islam. And I do understand that we need to get more data on this subject because, right now, we're just going off of, some qualitative data. But I do think we need to do more research with opinions on Islam, Muslims from both non-Muslims and Muslim societies. And also as a caveat, what we're proposing, we feel is going to be the best way forward, not just for converts, but also for the whole Muslim Ummah, right? So, and, just to be completely fair, like if I was a white convert in Japan, like I would be recommending the same approach to Japanese converts. let's get past the story. So, um, Sister Aliyah did a great job in talking about all these problems, ostracization and alienation from family members, perception as a cultural traitor, extreme loneliness, alienation, an extremely steep learning curve, not fitting in with the Muslim community, and like you said, a lot of converts end up leaving the Muslim community altogether. Um, so our thesis is as follows, and what we're proposing is a different model that's different from basically the way that many Islamic organizations have tried to help out converts in the past. And that is that converts to Islam should collectivize into sub-communities. They should have their own organizations, and they need to be the wolf pack. You know that Alia said that the converts need to find your group, right? Well, I guess our pitch to the Muslim community is that the converts are your group because they are willing to exist and do exist within your own cultural spheres. And that doesn't mean we should be separated from the greater Muslim community. You could still see all of your fellow Muslim brothers and sisters, but you know, we do really feel that the converts to Islam themselves, especially those who come from the same cultural background, should form their own organizations. They should have their own fora, their own restaurants, their own get-togethers, because that is super important. And we're going to get into a lot of that later. But basically, one of the main reasons why this is because when you belong to a non-Muslim society that has no Muslims in it. First of all, it's difficult to convert to Islam in the first place because there are no Muslims within that cultural sphere. When you look at for example, the African American Muslim community, for an African American to convert to Islam, they may already have an aunt or an uncle or a brother or a sister who's already Muslim, right? So I think when you belong to a society that has no Muslims in it, the mosque can only do so much. And a lot from what I'm hearing, and this is the same thing in Canada, is that for the most part, mosques, they don't have the time, they don't have the money, they don't have the resources or the wherewithal to help converts with a lot of these problems. And oftentimes when they propose solutions, uh, and this is not their fault, it can be actually counterproductive. We'll get into more about that later. Uh, but yeah, so that's basically our thesis, that we need to collectivize as converts in the same way that uh, different Muslim sub-communities have already done so in the West. So again, what does that look like? Just fleshing out what it looks like. One is, I guess, the three main events that we're focusing on here locally in London, Ontario, is Islam 101 courses, Quran 101 courses, and social events. Right. So again, you're taking people from a preschool level who have just converted to Islam, who know no Arabic, who may know very little to maybe a little bit about Islam, but to put them into in many of these mosques where the talks and the khutbas and the just the lessons are very, very advanced. And some people are able to pull this off. Some converts are able to, be like these superstars and go right into, the PhD level stuff. But I think, for many of them, we just need to start at the basics and social events just to get, more converts talking to one another and meet other people who have gone through the same experiences. Like I said, that doesn't mean you're shutting yourself off from the greater Muslim community. There's still our brothers and sisters in Islam, but there are things that we specifically need to work on. And like the rest of the Muslim community, they can help us out with this too by referring other converts to us, right? Other resources include networking when it comes to marriages, convert marriages, interventions, if possible, with family members, if that is approved by all parties, and networking with other masajid in nearby cities to do the same thing. So, like when it comes to family members, and I know Aliyah touched upon this, one of the ways that mosques try to help out converts is, let's have your family come to the mosque or come to an Islamic event. And for those who have family members who are willing to do that, that's great. But I would say that for the most part, many of our non-Muslim family members simply do not feel comfortable going to a mosque or an Islamic environment. And that's and even people who have a positive image of Islam, they may feel that this is not their turf, and vice versa. A lot of born Muslims simply don't want to enter our own cultural spheres, and that's perfectly fine. But if that's the case, we need to propose a different model in which the converts are collectivizing, and that way you have more converts within that cultural sphere. So let's compare, the pre-modern to the postmodern eras. Just gonna every once in a while, I'm just gonna make sure I'm not frozen. Abdullah, can you still hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. Could you stay on? Do you have to go off when I'm on? Sure. Okay, never mind. Anyway,
I'll stay on.
yeah, I just don't want to keep talking and then like like I realize that I've spoken to nobody for 10 minutes like last time.
Yeah, no
Okay,
worries.
so in the pre-modern era, right? We're talking about first Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and the Sahaba, who lived, let's talk specifically in Medina and how they helped the converts in Medina, right? So Medina, was one particular cultural sphere. It was in the middle of a desert. The two tribes of Al Aus and Al Hazraj and the Jews, they all lived in the same area, basically the same culture, right? So when someone converted to Islam, the Islamic sphere, right, basically encompassed that entire cultural sphere. It was the time, the time of the early days of Islam, right? Now, and then when Islam's expanded out into the world, right, you saw that Islam was being spread to different cultures that were not Arab, right? So and you found that these local populations, usually after a generation, they would usually supersede the Muslims who had traveled to their lands, right? So they became the majority of Muslims. So a perfect example of this is Andalusia, right? So most of the Muslims from Andalusia were native Iberians, right? So, and if you look at China as well, like Islam in the Xinjiang province, they incorporated Chinese culture into Islam, right? So over the centuries, it became embedded into their culture. Right. So, and in Islam, there's a term for this in Islamic jurisprudence and fiqh called urf. Right. So, urf is basically the culture or the customs of the people, and if it's not against the Sharia, it should be kept. Right. So, and one perfect example of this is the island of Crete in during the Ottoman era. As you know, Crete is now part of Greece, but a lot of people don't know this. Crete used to be half Christian, half Muslim, and the Muslims in Crete were fully Greek. They spoke Greek. They dressed exactly like the Greek Christians. The only difference was the religious insignia, and they were basically indistinguishable. They were fully Greek Muslims, and they had a subcommunity of Greek Muslims on Crete. Um, and you can look at other places in the world that did have a large Muslim population. They basically took on this culture because they converted as a group, right? So, but now it's a different era altogether, right? So now we're seeing a situation where the vast majority of Muslims who are living in non-Muslim countries, not just the West, come from other countries, basically, and these countries have had centuries to adapt their culture within Islam. But when it comes to the populations that are not Muslims and where they're at, whether that's Europeans or the Japanese, Northeast Asians, Latin Americans, Native Americans, right? They've never had this time to fully develop this culture. So to them, Islam seems foreign to them because they've never seen their people or their population adapt this cultural synthesis within Islam, right? So uh, that's one of the reasons why we're proposing this sub community, right? Because that basically it would basically flip the script on the image of Islam in the West, and that it would show that it would be compatible with all cultures, right? So uh, and you see like Muslims who have come from Muslim countries, they've created their own sub communities, and this is like for example, I'll give you a perfect example. When I was in Toronto, I went to the Eid prayer in Toronto, which was outdoors at the time, and the Somali community, they had their own mosque, and they had this Eid prayer, and 90% of the congregants in this Eid prayer were Somali. And then a block south of that, there was another masjid that was predominantly Desi, and they had their own Eid ceremony. And the imam was getting angry with this. He's like, "Why are we? We should be united as one ummah." And then I thought to myself, like, because the knee-jerk reaction is, we shouldn't be divided as Muslims, but at a certain point, like one can think maybe this is just natural human behavior. Maybe people just have natural affinities for one another based on language, shared experience, culture, nationality. And you have to look at it like a health model in any large city. When you have doctors and dentists and podiatrists and your general practitioner, right? They all function to help the whole health of the community. So they're united as medical health professionals. But that doesn't mean that, the general practitioner is now suddenly your gynecologist or your, drug rehab clinic or your podiatrist or your pediatrician. And that's where the general practitioner will refer people to the experts, right? I don't think that that's disunity, and I think that's one of the major reasons why there's a knee-jerk reaction to what we're proposing. But if you think about it, and I'm gonna bring this up right here, that for example, just in Canada, there are 16 Palestinian Canadian organizations. They're all under one giant coalition. And that, like they need to function as a community, especially now. It's super important for them. And, you can say, well, it's kind of just out of necessity. And, if we were one united Ummah, we wouldn't need these organizations. But, really, I don't think, it really functions that way in the 21st century West. And I don't really think that you can say that this is quote unquote disunity. I do think that there should be more collaboration between these organizations. But when you look up convert organizations in Canada, there is not a single organization for converts. Um, and I think that leads to many different problems, and I don't think that's the Muslim community's fault per se. I think that they can help us out. I think there's many ways that we can collaborate and work together, and that doesn't mean that we cannot fulfill all of each other's rights as Muslims. But when you're talking about something as simple as improving the relationship, the vis-a-vis Islam with your non-Muslim friends and family, and you have a Muslim community that simply doesn't want to interact with them, and vice versa, a different approach needs to be taken, because really that's not just blunting people converting to Islam in the first place, but also people even think about converting to Islam, because they're going to suffer a lot of problems with their friends and family. And to put this all on the Muslim community's shoulders is just it's too expensive. It's been tried before, and again, every single time we run into the exact same problems. So that's why we're proposing this model, which we call the Chapas model. So Chiapas is a province in northern Mexico, southern Mexico, I'm sorry. And there is a group of people who converted to Islam from the Tzotzil tribe, Tzotzil. RT did basically a show on them, and they converted to Islam as a group, right? So there were Spanish missionaries during the Zapatista rebellion who gave them dawah, and they converted to Islam as a group. And they're now a thriving community, a Muslim community in the heartland of Mexico. And they've incorporated their local dress, their cuisine, their language. And now when someone from that tribe converts to Islam, they already have people within those spheres who are already part of their family members. So Islam becomes basically embedded in that non-Muslim society, right? That's a perfect example. There's others example. Another perfect example is the African American sub community, as I stated before. Largest mass conversion to Islam in recent memory, really. And look, when you convert as a group, chances are that group is going to last as Muslims and still become part of the cultural fabric of the Muslim community. And on a final note, if we look at the situation of Muslims in Europe proper, there is a lot of uh, again, like Aliyah said, that the tide is turning in terms of the fact that we're getting more positive support, people supporting Muslims in Palestine and things of that nature, and that's great. But at the same time, there's also an increased polarization among people who are anti-Islam, right? And when we look at the different factions on the right, uh, and I don't recommend allying with either of these two factions, but one faction, which is the mainstream right, they just have it in for Islam. Like Islam should leave the West. It's a terrible religion. It's illiberal. But then you have another faction who actually respects Islam, but their main quibble is that their cultures are simply dying out. And like I said, I don't think we should ally with these people. I think that they're too angry and they're too entrenched in their own organizations. But if you have a communitarian approach to the dawah, like what we're suggesting, this would deflate the argument that Islam is culturally predatory. And like I said, if they convert to Islam and collectivize and gel into a group, um, then they can get married and they can have kids, and their kids have kids as well. And then you have, and this, would increase basically the Muslim population among Europeans. And also, you can use that as a bargaining chip for the safety and security of all Muslims who are living in the West and abroad. So I know this is a controversial solution. I think some of you are having a knee-jerk reaction right now to this idea. And like I said, I'm open to suggestions, and I know I haven't covered everything, but I'm open to any questions that you may have. If there's any questions in the chat, go ahead, Abdullah. Am I still there?
Yes, Jazakallah khair. Uh, yeah, we do have a few questions, inshallah. So, Omer, would you want to take the floor? Do you want to come on and see what questions are available?
Sure thing. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum, Robert. Glad to have you back.
Islam.
Thank you for
so
your
much.
insightful talk. I'll dive into the first question, inshallah. So the first question is, have you seen any success in implementing such a model, either yourself or elsewhere?
Yeah, so as I stated before, 4 perfect examples: the African American Muslim community, the largest conversion to Islam en masse in recent memory, the Tzotzil Muslims in Chiapas, Mexico, now a thriving Muslim community in southern Mexico, Zulu Muslims in South Africa. You can actually, Umar Farooq Abdullah did a great program and thesis on Islam and the cultural imperative, where he actually mentioned the Zulu Muslims. And one of the main barriers to them converting to Islam is that all the Muslims in South Africa were of Indian descent. So if they were converted to Islam, in their eyes, they would have to give up their Zulu culture and become South Asians. They said we don't like spicy food, but after they there's a good sheikh that I know. He's a good friend of mine. His name is Ismail Kamdar. He works for I forget what he works for now, but he lives in South Africa, and he says that now that the Muslims have tried this approach, where the Zulus basically have created their own organization and their own collectivization. There's a thriving community of Zulu Muslims in South Africa. And finally, Islam in Spanish. Islam in Spanish is headed by Brother Sheikh Yusuf Rios. He's out of Chicago, and they provide resources to Latino and Latino Muslims in the United States. And they done enormous work in helping Latinos who converted to Islam.
Amazing, Barakallahu feekum. The next question we have for you is, has there been any support from Muslim scholars or academics in your proposal?
Yeah, so we have a sheikh from the Hanafi madhab. He's on our Islam for Europeans website. He recently released a fatwa regarding this, specifically relating to Islam, Muslims of European descent, and so he supports the idea. Just in the whole idea of urf in Islam, like it's like you cannot impose a different culture on converts. So I think there needs to be more discussion about this, because it's something that I would like to see more feedback from Islamic scholars on. But the fact of the matter is, like I said, there are literally hundreds of Islamic organizations in the West that are focused on specifically things related to problems posed by Muslims of different nationalities, languages, cultures, and no Islamic scholar has ever batted an eyelash at these organizations. So to say that something that what we're proposing shouldn't exist. I mean, why at the same time be fair and say, well, why should these organizations exist? I think like it's they need, and I think they exist for a good reason. I think without them, like people understand their problems both the best, not only within their communities but also in their home countries. And to say that we shouldn't organize in this particular fashion. I mean, you could still be united as Muslims, and still have particular organizations that focus on particular different Muslim communities. So the short answer is yes, we do have Islamic scholarship that supports our idea. And just in general, we can back it up, with Islamic sources. But we would like to see more dialogue on this subject, because I do think that it's worth exploring more.
Amazing, Barakallahu feekum. The next question we have is, how do new Muslims navigate the different strands of Islam, especially when they come across fringe groups?
Well, we're a non-denomination. Islam for Europeans, we're a non-denominational organization, but like you do, we want to stay away, from extremism and different fringe groups and stuff. And what, like these groups they're always going to exist. And the best medicine for that is for mainstream Islamic organizations, to support, things that, that we're supporting. And that way, we become like the loudest voice with the biggest megaphone and the biggest draw. I'm just some of the non-Sunni organizations, for some reason or other, have, been better at us, Sunni Muslims, whether that's, the Salafi, or the Maturidi tradition, in various, ways of like reaching out to different organizations. And I think that's, like a failure on the part of Ahlus Sunnah wa Jama'ah. I think that we need to, focus on, outreach a lot more. But again, these organizations are always going to exist. It's just, the part of, moderate Islamic organizations, to focus on, providing these resources so that, we can be a bigger draw to, the converts, people who are interested in Islam. So.
Barakallah fikum. We've got a difficult question coming up next. What and how would you advise someone who is on the verge of leaving Islam?
Wow, that's a tough question. I mean, maybe due to various factors. I mean, like, I guess you have to probe further. Is it because, of a controversial topic in Islam? Is it because they don't feel that they're supported? Is it because of family pressure? So that question itself can be divided into several different subcategories. If it has to do with like controversial topics like the young age of Aisha, there's several resources you can find. I mean, Muhammad Hijab has a good response to that. So those are answerable, but I guess you have to probe further and kind of figure out why. Like again, like a lot of these, I don't know if they're talking specifically about converts, but if they're, if they're being influenced by their family, I mean, that's a very deeply related issue, and I think that, like that requires a lot more probing. But definitely, I see a lot of converts, they end up leaving Islam because I think the whole framework of how we try to bring converts in is that, I gotta do this, 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 and if I do these things, I'm Muslim, and if I don't do these things, I'm not Muslim. I think that's the wrong framework. I think we need to establish like what does it mean to be a Muslim, and no matter how many sins you committed, you can still repent to Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. So um, definitely, we need to understand Islam as a framework that you belong to a Muslim, you've taken your Shahada, and there's no place to go, but up really. And I think that's really important at times, but again, like that might be some other reason why they're on the verge of leaving Islam. So
Barakallah fikum. One last question. Do you think or see that there are any shortcomings to the model? And if so, what are the ways that you can see around them?
are you talking about the model we're proposing?
Yes, yeah.
Well, lack of funding. I mean, we need to. I mean, we would like to do more research to sort of solidify, the opinions of get more feedback on, like opinions of Muslims, non-Muslims, and how they interact or don't interact with different societies. So I think we need to get more data to back this up, because neither side really has data. I mean, our detractors don't have data either. We're just, basing all of our opinions on whims. I mean, like just look at like what Muslims think about, like attitudes that non-Muslims have towards Islam. I mean, like I did a tweet poll for like Canadians who were involved in the Freedom Convoy, which a lot of people thought was like a fascist movement, and asked them like, "What do you think about Islam?" And I gave four options: positive, neutral, slightly negative, highly negative. 20% said positive, 37% said neutral, 19% said slightly negative, and 27% said highly negative. So 57% of the people in that group had either a neutral or positive opinion of Islam. And when I showed Muslims that, they were absolutely shocked. They thought it would be like 80-90% of these people hate Islam. So I think it's one, not a flaw, but it's things that we need in order to support our endeavor. In terms of like the model being flawed, I think there's a big reluctance upon conference themselves to take this on. And I think that those are often our biggest detractors of the converts themselves. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that these are converts who, either they already have a good relationship with their family, and that's why they converted to Islam in the first place, So, you know, like the whole family issue is not a big problem for them. So that's why they feel comfortable kind of like diving into a Muslim community, or their families already rejected them. So for them to think, you know, the whole idea of like, you know, forming a wolf pack, it doesn't mean anything to them. And I think part of that has to do with, you know, what we call in research survivorship bias, where, you know, like the fact that so many Westerners want to convert to Islam, but they don't want to, you know, like become integrated members in the Muslim community. You know, that's siphons off the vast majority of Westerners who are actually interested in Islam. So that is a problem that we're aware of. So that is a flaw in the model. But, you know, like I said, we need more research on the subject to, you know, to kind of like figure out, you know, how we can address those issues.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Robert. Indeed, really insightful half an hour or so. And I'm sure our audience learned quite a few things, some really unique perspectives in there. And we really appreciate you coming on and providing your time. And same likewise for Sister Aliyah, although she has left now.
Yeah.
And we'd love to do this again, maybe sometime in the future, a few months, maybe a similar or slightly different topic. But yeah, Jazakallah khair. I'm sure the audience have also enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess we'll end there. I don't think there's any more questions. So
yeah, I guess we'll end it there. But thank you so much for having me on, Abdullah. You know, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward us for our humble efforts. And you know, like I said, I take on this project because I care about the Muslim community as a whole. And you know, I've been Muslim for 20 years, and we've tried the same model over and over and over again. And you know, it's successful to some converts, but for the vast majority, you know, it falls short. And I don't want the Muslim community to end up, you know, wasting money on this, because we're going to see an influx of converts to Islam in the coming years. So, you know, thank you so much for having me on, Abdullah. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, no worries at all. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت واستغفرك وأتوب إليك والسلام عليكم